Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Accelerate Digital Transformation with Mobile Test Automation. We're excited you're able to join us today and set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is hosted by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit testinginstitute.com. This webinar is sponsored by Infostretch, a digital-first professional services firm. The company helps enterprises get digital right the first time by combining ready-made tools, framework, technologies, and partnerships with their in-depth experience. We will have time for a short Q&A at the end of today's session. You may submit your questions at any time by using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Please identify the instructor whom the questions are to be addressed to. Today's presenters will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. If you have any technical problems or issues during the webinar, please email onlineadmin@iist.org and someone will be with you and help you right away. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at testinginstitute.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. Today's webinars will have three presenters. Amir Rosenberg. Amir is the Director of Product Management, responsible for core product strategy at Perfecto, the leading digital cloud and test automation company. Gail Gallegos is the Director of DexYP, responsible for application delivery and digital and enterprise application. Gail has been a driver at DexYP in moving automation and DevOps processes forward to allow the company to move quickly with quality throughout the software development lifecycle. And Kedar Apt. Kedar is the QA manager at Infostretch. He has over 17 years experience in engineering digital and enterprise applications, specifically in test automation and mobile testing. Now we'll go over today's agenda. The first section of the webinar, Amir from Perfecto will discuss the landscape of mobile testing in the digital age. Next, Gail from DexYP will share about their digital transformation journey, the challenges they faced, and the role of mobile. And lastly, we'll hear from Kedar from Infostretch, who will reveal steps to success and the pitfalls to avoid in mobile test automation. I will now turn the webinar over to today's first presenter, Amir. Amir?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the line. I'm very excited to be here with you talking about digital transformation and the opportunities and challenges that it brings with it, as well as how to address those from a quality perspective. What are the tools, processes, and how do you organize the team to be ready for those challenges? I'm very excited to be joined today by Infostretch and DexYP, and this holistic story, I think, brings together really three parties who are all tuned into the success of DexYP and overall success in the marketplace. So very, very exciting story today. Definitely looking forward to the discussion and the Q&A that will come afterwards. So I wanted to take a step back and, describe what's happening before our eyes in the landscape of delivering services and content over the web interfaces, the digital interfaces. So we see more and more banks, services, healthcare services, retail, and so forth, virtualizing onto digital delivery channels. And those could be on multiple different screens and multiple different touch points at different times of the day, according to the user preference of the screen and time and their mode of operation and so forth. It really does bring forward the best of the interaction with the brand, between the user and the brand, to achieve their goal in a streamlined, engaging, and even fun way that really enriches our day-to-day life, whether we're trying to achieve a chore or we're trying to go through an enjoyable experience. But what we're seeing across all of these organizations is that digital transformation should be the leading strategy of all organizations, because what we see in the brick and mortar businesses is they are being bypassed by those who are successful and know how to execute in digital strategy. And in each of those verticals, whether you look at retail, healthcare insurance, search, banking, financial services, those who are fluent and are executing well in digital platforms are those who are gaining more market share with the users and are taking over the market. And unfortunately, the reality of it is that we're seeing the brick and mortar businesses actually shutting down, taking down staff, taking down branches, and so forth. And so whether you're looking at check deposits, exciting new biometrics, conversational virtual assistant in the terms of chatbot and so forth, all of these things really come together to create a cohesive, streamlined experience that is really engaging. And what we see is really innovation across the different platforms really helps every single brand, and every single brand engages with these different technologies in order to accelerate their digital innovation. We're certainly seeing in front of our eyes evolution, really accelerated evolution of conversational interfaces. It could be through your application. For example, recently Bank of America launched the Erica virtual assistant inside the app where you can ask for what is my account balance or transfer money or things of that nature. But that also expands to Alexa and Google Home, and even conversing over the big screen at your home through Fire TV and Alexa and the likes. So really streamlining, instead of text entry, we're streamlining the experience. In the same token of trying to streamline experiences and elevate security inside the engagement is the entire set of new authentication methods, such as Face ID, Touch ID, and so forth, where you can imagine in-app transactions such as in a war game or building a castle. Prior to this, trying to enter credentials would not have been an acceptable transaction, but just putting your thumb on it really streamlines and enables the user. And then, of course, onboard sensors in terms of check scanning, in terms of healthcare, location, and so forth. And lastly, of course, augmented reality that is now really expanding in the marketplace. But what does that mean to the team lead? For the team lead, they are being pushed to increase the coverage of the scope of the application, while at the same time they're pushed to bring the application much faster to market. And what that really means is that quality, even though the expectation from end users really goes higher, the quality usually suffers and it stays out. And what, from the team lead perspective, when they come into the launch of the sprint, in reality is what they find is that all of the capacity that they are planning towards innovation, all of the capacity actually ends up in bug fixes, technical debt, fixing latent feedback from users in production, and so forth. And so your innovation goes down, you don't have time to innovate and provide quality. It takes a longer time and you need sometimes to delay the launch, or you actually need to falsely launch the product with known risk, known defects, and also your cost goes up. So while the organization is placing a significant investment into innovation and velocity, the quality isn't there. And you end up late to market with a lot of risk. That's not a good composition. It's not a good position for the team lead. And what we're trying to show here in this webinar is that there are ways to embed efficiently quality activities into the sprint such that the developers will be happier, you would be more efficient, and your users would get a much better product. And you can see here, for example, it's an interesting chart that shows when do defects get introduced, when are they found, and a staggering stat around the cost of finding defects in production. Because finding defects in production means that the developer needs to stop, they need to do the root cause analysis, they need to undo code, and then redo the code. Very, very expensive exercise. So we want to change the game dramatically. We want to really transform the game. And one of the things to transform the game is think about quality in DevOps. Quality in DevOps, like many other things in DevOps, consists of process, people, and technology change. And the main mantra is that everything needs to work all the time. For example, all teams, all squads are working at the same rhythm. You can take real-time decisions and correct defects, and developers do participate in the quality process. There's a focus on coding, so everything has to be stable. Green is green. 3 strikes for a test that failed means that that test isn't being executed again, and smart retry. From a people's perspective, we need to elevate the skills of the manual testers so that they can participate in the sprint itself, and so forth. I'll come back to people a bit later. And lastly, from a technology perspective, you need a reliable lab, a reliable that is scalable, is stable, and you can really rely on. You need a framework that will enable your staff to create scalable, reliable automation. And you need a solution for big data reporting, because once you have a lot of executions, a lot of coverage, finding that needle from the haystack, if you don't have a big data reporting, is a very difficult task. So what are the components of a solution that would allow you to embed quality activities in DevOps? The first one is maximize the test coverage. So think about the basic scenarios, but also think about all the scenarios, all the platforms, and all the scenarios that would extend. So the different platforms and the different mobile platforms and sensors, same-day support for new platforms such as iPhone X and so forth, and then also providing coverage for realistic real user scenarios, not just testing in the lab. Similarly, high degree of test automation. What's happening manually at the end of the sprint would lead to late defect finding. If you can automate all kinds of scenarios, such as check scanning, location, different networks, and so on and so forth, rotation, and so on and so forth, then you can really achieve in-sprint quality in non-human manner. Fast feedback, the ability to provide to developers, insight about a defect that was found minutes after they did the commit. So from a developer's perspective, if you tell me that 2 minutes after commit, I can know that I can introduce the bug, I won't even bother entering that bug into Jira. I'll go straight ahead and add it. And what you'll find is that if tests ran, and indeed I can provide that developer feedback about a defect 2 minutes after I code it, the satisfaction and efficiency of developers rises tremendously. And lastly, the same tool integrated across the process, across the SDLC, right? So there's no over-the-wall attitude. All the teams are using the same tool across the life cycle of the features or your Jenkins jobs, and this way you can really get visibility cross teams as well as executives into the health of the application all over these SDLC cycles. So if we now tie this to the concept of a lab, you can see at the bottom a lab that consists of all the devices and the platforms that you would need, and the ability to automate all the scenarios that you need, whether it's different browsers or IoT devices or mobile devices or desktops, whether it's different network and different locations and so on and so forth, the ability to connect a new iPhone almost immediately. That's the lab. And then when we talk about elevating the skills of people, we talk about frameworks that support BDD, English-like scripting, such that testers can come to the sprint initiation, they can understand the committed requirements, and indeed from the get-go of the sprint, they can already write test cases. And at that point, when the developer develops some functionality, they can already start testing. The test is ready for them. Clearly, a strong big data digital reporting solution. And lastly, that DevOps bridge, that open API connector to Jenkins, to your reporting solution, to various different platforms and connectors throughout your CI, such that when you do a commit, automatically Jenkins builds the software, deploys the IPA, APK, and server technology, runs a couple of tests, and automatically within 2 minutes again, you've got results for 10 test cases that show you the defect that just happened. So this is really a solution that emphasizes both the lab, the people, and the process. And the unique thing that we in Perfecto pride ourselves in is, yes, you can do this yourself using open source. There are multiple different solutions in the marketplace. But there is one solution that really brings it all together such that you, as a team lead, can stop worrying about managing the lab and managing frameworks and managing reporting and managing all these things. The quality in DevOps solution is in your hand through Perfecto. It's one solution that gives you all the tooling that you need throughout the SDLC inside the sprint. This is what we call quality in DevOps. And so with that, I hope that makes sense. Looking forward to the questions later. I'm going to hand it over to Gail. Gail?
Thank you, Amir. I appreciate that. And as Amir told you about Perfecto, I'm going to take you through the journey of a transition that DexYP traveled through where we had to move from our printed directory into the digital space. At DexYP, we believe in the American dream. Our mission is to help America's local independent business owners thrive as we have for decades, because they represent the backbone of America's economy and the heart of its communities. In the past, we've had directories, which some of you probably don't even know what those are, but in today's world where you would look up a person or a business, you would look those up on your phone or your desktop. And in the past, our company produced what we called the yellow pages and directories for the telephone companies where people would look up those listings and find those businesses. We believe in a free enterprise, a diverse, dynamic economy, and the American dream of owning an independent local business. So local businesses like the plumbers, the local restaurants, the landscapers, the florists, you know, they don't have the big marketing companies that manage their advertising for them. So our company strives to make sure that we get them out in the open and let people find them very easily. We believe consumers should have choices other than the chains and the global e-commerce. I know a lot of times when folks go on vacations, they like to go eat at the local restaurant. And in order to find them, we have to make sure our clients get out there in the sites and the spaces on the mobile devices and on the desktops so that people can find those locations and they can go visit those locations and use those local consumers. We believe devotion to supporting independent business owners is a worthy, noble calling. You know, with the independent businesses, the small businesses, a lot of folks talk about those. You know, that's the American dream, to be able to, you know, be your own boss and handle your own destiny. And I talked about, you know, how we got to the digital space. So in today's mobile on-demand economy, consumers expect instant communication and service. So the local independent business owners must use the tools their customers use or risk losing business to the national chains, venture-backed startups, and sophisticated regional players. You know, in the past, you were able to, if you needed to find a plumber, you went to the phone book, you looked underneath the category of a plumber, and your phone book was local to your area. So you would go through the listings, and depending on the size of the ad or where that person fell on the page, that would be the person that you called. In today's world, our clients are advertisers for the small businesses. We want to make sure that people are going to find them. So we had to get to that next level and start to utilize more of the mobile devices and the desktops. And in doing so, we had to find new technology and ways to keep our consumers out there and make sure that people can find them. A lot of folks, like I said, don't use the phone book anymore, so hence the transition for DexYP to move away from that technology and into the mobile space and allow folks to find our clients through the mobile space. So some of the digital customer offerings that we have for our clients is online listings. So those are allowing our clients to get out on the browsers and the mobile devices so that if somebody is looking to get their air conditioning fixed, that they can go out to their browser and they can find air conditioning vendors that are located in the Dallas, Texas area. And that will allow them to find these businesses that advertise with our company. Another way that we help through the digital customer offerings for our clients is Thrive. Thrive manages the advertising. So unlike the big companies, the Chili restaurants, and the Sears and Roebuck and some of those other companies, we manage those advertising for the small businesses. So we're their marketing department. We make sure that they get out to the sites they need to, that they have a website that folks can get to, that their website is easy to understand and get through, that they're found in all of the different types of places like Google and Yahoo and Yext, and that they're visible to people when they are needed. We also do a lot of display and social, easily drive traffic to a business's website. Some other places would be some Facebook advertising. We allow our customers to get out to Facebook, so if folks are out on Facebook, you see some trigger ads sometimes. If you look something up, all of a sudden you go to Facebook and all of a sudden you're given an ad for a customer that shows something that you were looking up in Google. So we try and make sure that for our clients that they're able to be seen in the social area. And then also search engine marketing. Show up in more places where more people search. So like I said before, when you're out there in Google and you're doing your searches, if Google doesn't house that information, that it will send it to the places that do. We have 3 online IYP sites, SP.com, YP.com, and DexKnows, and those are areas that you can find a local business by just searching on the category of a florist or a plumber and the area that you're in, and it'll bring up all of the listings and advertising for our clients and that advertise either on our site or on a Google site or on a Facebook site, any one of those, and it'll show that to the clients so that they can find the right place that they want to do business with. And there's many means of social media, ensuring when you launch new products to test for advertising validation. One of the chores that we had in this transition was making sure that our clients, when they advertised with us, consumers that would bring them up on a mobile device versus a desktop, that the website would come up cleanly and visible and be easy to use, or their ad that they may be showing on Google, whether they're bringing it up on their mobile device or an iPad, that it was going to show up correctly and be visible to the consumer that's looking for that business. And in this ever-changing, automation was very, very important. We changed devices, we changed operating systems, so we knew at that point it was very, very important to make sure that we had the technology available to us, that we can do that validation quickly and make sure that it was going to be correct when we launched to production. So some of the challenges that we faced when we got into this space, and that has gotten a lot easier for us, but is still ever-changing, is, and I know Amir mentioned this a little while ago, about moving quickly with quality. In today's world, we can't just sit back and wait 6 months to release a new product or to release some changes to some of our sites. We want to make sure that we can release quickly, but also to make sure that when we do release, that it's got quality. We wouldn't want to release a new version of our IYP sites and then all of a sudden a customer's ad's not showing up correctly. They are paying us for this advertising, so we need to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can for them. Multiple devices and browsers was another challenge. Initially, when we got into the mobile space, we were trying to do a lot of the testing internally. And we thought, okay, well, we can just buy some devices and have different operating systems for them. And we can also have different PCs that had the different browsers and different browser versions on them and do it manually. It was very time consuming. It took forever. It was not utilizing our resources efficiently. And of course, with the ever-changing software updates, we all know whenever you have to upgrade a device or a new operating system, it's time-consuming to get all those devices upgraded. You also have to go ahead and sign new contracts with the service provider in order to upgrade your devices. So this was very costly to us, and being a company transitioning from one form of technology into another, you want to manage your expenses and make sure that you can handle the expenses that you're incurring with keeping up with the technology that was going on. So these are some of the areas that, you know, we had to be aggressive. We had to stay up with the competition, you know, and frequently, you know, the new contracts with the service providers. And this is when we stepped into finding the automation tools and trying to help get through all of this quickly and have the tools available that we can test the multiple browsers and we can test the multiple devices, but of course managing those expenses at that time. And these are some of the challenges that occurred to us, and with rolling over to utilizing some of the automation tools and Perfecto, we were able to handle those expenses and those challenges and continue to give our clients what they needed as we moved into the digital workspace. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kedar, and he's going to talk about Infostretch and their role in the automation.
Hey, thanks, Gail and Amir. Hi, everyone. So this is Kedar Akhte. I'm QA manager at Infostretch. And just now we heard the challenges Gail has mentioned. So what we are doing, so we heard all her challenges, and we went back to the table on the drawing board, and we started understanding what is the challenge, what is the strategy we have to come up, and how we can help our client. So while doing that, we first of all we come up with 4 points, or say 5 points. Number 1 point was identifying the right framework, then selecting the right tool for the execution. Third is our strategy, how we can help client, how we can meet the demand of the client. Fourth is constructing the right team, and fifth is the execution. So now the first point was the framework. So after hearing all the challenges, we said, okay, what framework we have to consider which will help us long term. So we started with considering our own framework, which is QMetry Automation Framework. We also tried to compare it with other framework like Normalized SNG, and we said, okay, we want a framework which can which can integrate with seamlessly with all the open source tools, can be integrated with test management platforms, the mobile devices, and as our framework, as you can see, it can be integrated with Selenium, with Appium. On the test management tool, it can integrate with HPLM. Currently, we are integrating that with Rally. It also can be integrated with QMetry out of the box. When it comes to the continuous integration, it can be integrated well with Hudson, Jenkins, Bamboo, and so on and so forth. Now, coming up to the tool, we compare various mobile device cloud solutions and like Perfecto or Source Lab, and we have various points which will give us the outcome. Okay, what is the right platform which can help us? So moving on to the framework, earlier, as Gail was saying, we were trying to execute all the test cases on our local all using simulator, emulator. But when it comes to the local execution, you have tremendous problems. And one of the problem is if we want to execute on the iOS device, then you have to have Mac with you. Then only the the execution is seamless. Same with Android. So then we decided, okay, we'll go with Perfecto, and then our biggest challenge was how we can deliver the test cases that were suit faster. That's why we started with the Perfecto on the parallel execution, and I can show you the slide where you can see the timing of the execution when we are doing without Perfecto and with Perfecto. My third point was strategy. Now coming to again framework, we were looking for a framework who can actually support mobile web, mobile native, including HTML5. We also want our framework built-in who can also support the all kind of APIs. Then while building our script, our main intention was how I can write my script which has a low maintenance and which has the maximum output and optimization. We are also looking for a framework which can support as Amir said, BDD or keyword driven or even the code driven. So good part about BDD, and this is we have experience that once you create your steps in the BDD, then actually product manager also can take those steps and he can write his scenarios, he can write his he can write his output or acceptance criteria. That will give a lot of help to your team, to your manual team or to your automation team, how to how to go with the story and what kind of testing has to be done. So that was a great example how we can go beyond our team and how we can help the business. We were also looking for the reporting. There are tons of framework, there are tons of execution, but when it comes to the reporting after the execution, you have to have a report or you have to have a framework which can spit out the detailed analysis, that can have a checkpoint, that can have the raw logs, that can have the trend reporting. So trend reporting is one of the main feature, because as a team lead, as a team test manager, you can see, okay, this particular execution is going on for last 2 weeks, and how is the trend? Whether it is bad at the beginning of the execution and it is getting better and better at the end, or it's other way around. So looking at the trend, you actually can understand where your project is going, how the stories are being delivered, and what is your next path. So that was our major concerning area, how I can make it how I can make it better, and we are able to we are able to complete our task within given time. Now we also did one more thing here is when the execution is going on, we actually capture the entire clip, and that can be shown to a developer rather than giving them the test data, rather than giving them the test step. We generally give them the report. They can see the execution as a clip, and they can understand, okay, what are the steps before the defect has happened, which actually help them to fix it like end to end. Then it comes to the CI integration. So here we are we're using Jenkins, and it is pretty out of the box, and we have Selenium Hub and Node, so we can execute the test cases even though we want to execute on the web and on the mobile. We can do it seamlessly, no issues. And then after we define our framework, we went to select the tool, and as I said earlier, we were actually selecting the tool, comparing that with various competitor, and we came up with the Perfecto because he is the right partner for us. Now coming back to the next point, which is the team. So here, what we have done, we have divided our team into two pieces, we call as hub and spoke. So we have one team who actually, they are only there to create the common function, pages, object repositories, and once they create the whole stuff, they can hand over it to the functional team, and using that stuff, using that steps, the functional team can actually start writing their test cases in form of BDD. So my core team is actually doing the technical stuff, and my hybrid team, which I call as a functional team plus automation team, they can write their test cases, they can execute it, they can see the reports, and they can, if they have any issues, which in between of the test case, if they want to run any API, they can come back to my team of the core team. Core team can help them up, and they can come up with a better solution. So here, what is happening that before we get any stories, we take all the required components, and we as a technical team, we decide, okay, what are the different components we have to create, what are the different components we have to modify, and what are the different components which we can eliminate. With these three things, we come up with a plan for the release, and that's why when it comes to the execution, we start our execution literally from day 1 or day 2 of the release. Why? Because we have done all the homework before even the sprint starts. We work very closely with developers, so before the code is ready on the environment, we get all the object IDs from the developer, and we start at least building our skeleton, which we can give it to our test team, and they can start writing their BDDs. Now, in terms of the execution, here you can see that earlier the execution was literally taking 40 minutes just for the smoke test. And when we start our parallel execution, when we start executing with multiple OS, so when I say parallel execution, it is not the execution only on various devices of the same family, but I can execute a few test cases on iOS, again on different versions, and some test cases I can execute on Android, again on different versions. So now imagine your one execution is actually happening on 4 different devices or 5 different devices. So we can say within a day that, okay, whether you are able to execute, whether you are able to complete the coverage of your mobile devices, and yes, we can complete in a day. So here I'm just giving an example of one of our smoke tests, but now we have around 500 to 600 test cases, and we can give the result in a maximum in 1 day. Why? Because our execution and our reporting is so clean that it will take hardly any time for our testers as well as our developers to understand, and that makes us pretty fast in terms of our execution. So here you can see the difference of how I started before I start the parallel execution, or before I start with my actual device, and then with my multiple devices. So here you can see this. I'm just giving you one example. Like that, there are multiple devices, multiple examples we can get you, and with this kind of our strategy, we are able to get control of few of the challenges what Gail has mentioned. Now we are able to serve to different teams, and all the teams are actually coming back to us saying that, okay, whatever you have implemented into one group, we want to implement the same thing into the other group. So we are helping all the groups, and I hope we are actually whatever Gail has challenges, we are able to solve it. So that's come to the going to my end. Back to you.
Thank you, Kedar. Thank you very much. We do have time for some questions now. We'll move into the question part. I have the first question is for Amir. Amir, what are some best practices in managing quality and expanding application scope and architecture?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we touched on a lot of these things in this webinar, but I would suggest to the team lead who's dealing with this expansion, this rapid expansion and shortening of the sprint, is really to think about, again, the construct of the DevOps. In terms of the tooling, naturally they need a lab that is ideally in the cloud, that they don't need to manage, that encompasses all the platforms that they're responsible for, as well as enables their team to be efficient in sprint. In other words, both those who are skilled at development, so a framework that enables Java or JavaScript, etc., coding, but also BDD in terms of English-like scripting that really brings the contribution from less skilled, typically manual testers into the sprint itself from the initiation. So I think one thing is lab. On the topic of people, we spoke about it, but really looking at your QA team, identifying leading people who can enable the rest of them, are more skilled, and then embedding the typical traditional QA team into the different squads. And lastly, thinking about it as a process. So you have your lab, now think about enabling the transactions that are happening around the lab, the build process, the deployment process, the test process, the reporting process, enabling all of those to be automated and orchestrated via Jenkins or TeamCity or your build server, such that activities are automated and are immediate. When I do a commit, a build happens, it deploys the build on the devices and servers, a test happens, and I get the results. This way you really close the loop between the coding and the defect realization or finding. And so in terms of the process, now you kind of zoom out from that construct of coding to finding a defect, and you find that this can happen all the time in a scalable manner. In other words, you can have 8 different squads or 150 different squads all running at their own pace independently and running very, very frequent and accelerated integration such that you don't end up at the end of the sprint and you're seeing that things don't integrate. So frequent integrations, frequent test cycles in sprint, I think are really the secret to embedding quality in DevOps and bringing a quality product that keeps expanding incrementally in its scope.
Great. Thank you, Amir. Our next question is for Gail. Gail, what has been your biggest struggle throughout the transition to digital platforms to overcome?
I think the biggest struggle is keeping up with change. Change affects us in a lot of ways. In DexYP, we have change from other third-party vendors that we use. So if Google makes changes, we have to quickly react to those changes. If our marketing department decides to launch new products, we have to be able to react to those types of changes very quickly. And the other types of things that I talked about in my presentation was the devices and the technology changes and what's the proper tools to use, and will the tools keep up with some of the changes that we have. So it's always looking for how to make us better and keep up with what we've got on our plate. So, myself and several other leads in my organization, we try and always keep up with the technologies that are out there, what other companies are using, what our competition is doing, so that we can make sure that we're ahead of the game and we're more in a proactive mode for change than a reactive mode for change. And I think that's probably the hardest thing, because not only do you have to keep up with the deadlines that we have from our company leadership on what we want to launch, but also to make sure that we're keeping up with the technologies that are out there and making sure that with the resources we have and the budget that we have, that we're able to keep up with the amount of change quickly. And again, with the quality, we always want to make sure that we're adding that quality in there, because people have a choice nowadays. They don't always have to come back to our site, or clients don't always have to utilize us for our advertising. So it's very, very important to make sure that we give them what they need and the quality's there so that they do come back and they enjoy when they come visiting our sites and utilizing what we've put out there.
Great. Thank you, Gail. And our next question is for Kedar. Kedar, how would you support different devices, OS, and languages?
Hi, this is a good question, and we we encounter this question almost every client, every place. As I was talking about my presentation, so these three key factors about framework, tool, and the team, that actually helps us a lot to determine how I can, encounter this question as always changing the world. If you see Android has various versions right now in the market, like iOS. iOS actually, if you see, most of the people will go to the next version, latest version. But on the Android side, there are a lot of people still using the KitKat, which is the oldest version. So as a service provider, we have to make sure that my framework, my tool is actually able to cater all kind of OS, all kind of devices, and which will also make sure that I'm able to support the APIs. So with this framework, the robust term framework, I would say you are definitely able to solve your problem along with the good partner like Perfecto to get the challenges from your client and then solve it as soon as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kedar. That is all the time we have today. That's all the questions that we have right now. So I would like to thank today's webinar sponsor, Infostretch. If you're interested in learning more about Infostretch's services, please email info@infostretch.com. I'd also like to thank our three speakers, Amir, Gail, and Kedar, for the outstanding and very informative webinar today. Thank you all for your time today. And thank you to everyone for joining us for today's webinar hosted by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit testinginstitute.com. Again, if you're interested in learning more about Infostretch's services, please email info@infostretch.com. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great day.